Good evening, everybody. Many of you all are already tuned in, and some of you all will be tuning in due course of time. At the outset, let me tell you that I am indeed honored to have been invited to speak on the occasion of this great World Heritage Week that Indian Museum is celebrating, and they have invited me to give a talk on the cultural heritage conservation in Calcutta. I am indeed honored to the Indian Museum that they have given me this platform to speak on this significant World Heritage Week, and I have chosen to title my talk as Dalhousie Square, a heritage zone of the nation. Dalhousie Square is the common heritage of the nations of the world, for it was built by the English and inherited by the people of India. All nationalities contributed to develop its stature. The Armenians, the Americans supplied ice for Calcutta. The Chinese got their opium from here. The Swedish missionary built their first Protestant church in Dalhousie Square. The Greeks, the Armenians, the Portuguese, the Jews all established their house of gods here in Dalhousie Square. The Dutch, the French, the Japanese, the Chinese, and the British banks vie with Indian banks to serve the common man and commerce from the square. Science, technology, and art join hands to make India modern from Dalhousie Square when the British built their empire in the East. Noble scientists, among whom we may count Sir C.V. Raman and Sir Ronald Ross, worked in the square. Railways, telephones, telegraph, and modern means for a technological revolution originated in Dalhousie Square. And needless to say, the road to political freedom for India also lay through Dalhousie Square. During the 18th and the 19th century, Calcutta reigned as the capital of the British Raj in India. At its heart stood Dalhousie Square, around which operated the political, the financial, social world of the Indian Empire, until the capital got shifted to Delhi in 1911. The evolution of the city has really seen the surge of development and construction of huge number of houses during this period of 18th century and 19th century in Calcutta. So the Dalhousie Square became a very prominent part of the city, where around the Tank Square, a water body, large amount of institutions, buildings were built, and much on the lines of the European designs. Dalhousie Square is where the British dreams were given their most extravagant expressions, not only in the context of Calcutta or India or the then Indian subcontinent, but also in the context of the entire Southeast Asia and maybe in other parts of the world. British architects and military engineers filled the city with neoclassical buildings, riverside promenades, manicured parks, as well as office buildings and apartment houses, all constructed along the lines of European models. For example, the Governor House was modelled in the form and style of the stately mansion of Candleston Hall in Derbyshire in England. Kolkata High Court, which was earlier the Supreme Court before 1911, was also designed in the same style and form as the Town Hall at Ypres in Belgium, and many, many other buildings were all following the same neoclassical designs subsequently. Following independence, the square was renamed as Binoy Badol Dinesh, BBD, named after three valiant fighters that in 1930s braved odds to storm into the Writers' Building. The bastion of the British rule, and spelled havoc. Dalhousie Square, the original city centre with a large central water body, constitutes one of the India's or Asia's few remaining colonial city centres. To have retained such a great number of period buildings, illustrating the significant stages in the evolution of the city from 1695 to the independence of 1947. During this 200 years of Calcutta, from a small, sleepy hamlet along the Gangetic River, was transformed into a bustling metropolis, as much a Victorian city as Manchester, Leeds or Birmingham, and grander by far than any of them. There has been a lot of first innovations, discoveries, demonstrations in Dalhousie Square. Hickey's Guess It was first published from here. The first newspaper, The Englishman, was published from here from 1833 to 1845. Electricity was introduced here when the Fluries in 1878. Uses of gas was first demonstrated here as early as 1900. The first Indian Broadcasting Corporation was set up here in August 1997. The first escalator was built inside the Reserve Bank of India, which was the Imperial Bank at that point in time. Nobel laureate C.V. Raman, whose first job was in Accountant General Office, which stands right there in Dalhousie Square. India's first hotel, the Great Eastern Hotel, was set up in 1840s. The first English playhouse was set up at the crossing of Mission Row and Lal Bazaar area in 1745. The first Bank of Bengal was set up way back in 1770. The city suffered decades of neglect. Many historic buildings were demolished over the years. An incongruous development, high-rises were built, citing development as an alibi. Fortunately, the square, significant historic buildings, survived this development alibi, as they have been mostly occupied by corporate institutions government offices, and so on. In recent years, about a decade or so, there has been the government, the private and the other civic organizations have been starting to think differently about the city's architectural legacy. The buildings once occupied by the British need not, however, be haunted by imperial ghosts. Rather, they can be put to use in ways that would benefit the city, with their aesthetic contribution as a happy byproduct. And thus, the town hall built in 1813 became the first major building that was renovated, which now functions as a museum of the history of Calcutta and offer spaces for public events. The riverside promenade, which was inaccessible with a big wall, where the city and the river was almost detached from each other, where looking back to back, has been kind of opened up, and a beautifully landscaped riverside promenade was re-established by the Development Authority, who has plans of extending the same landscape of the promenade further deep into the north. The Great Eastern Hotel, which was the first earliest classified hotel in the country, has recently been privatized and taken over by the prominent hotel group in India, who are restoring it as a heritage hotel. The classical Mackinnon Mackenzie building, which was overlooking the river, which is Agent's building, a very prominent Agent building, has been privately restored by retaining the classical architectural facade of the building. The municipal authority or the corporation has been also active in enacting legislations, making heritage committees, also banning advertisement hoardings on heritage buildings, embarked on improvement of footpaths and street furnitures, highlighting heritage buildings by facade lighting, and appropriately designed signages and interpretation boards. World Monument Fund, for 2 consecutive years in 2004 and 2006, declared Dalhousie Square, Kolkata, as one of the 100 sites of significant cultural heritage that requires urgent protection. It joined hands with sites like Georgetown in Malaysia, churches and synagogues in Italy, and the Great Wall of China, among others. Today, Georgetown is inscribed as a World Heritage Site in 2008. Can Dalhousie Square be far behind? Dalhousie Square Heritage Zone is a unique, symbiotically, functionally, and physically related space with the banking district in the north and the riverfront in the west, which were considered for the delineation of the zone. Within the small area of Dalhousie Square of approximately 2 square kilometers, about 106 listed heritage buildings by the local authority exist, dating back to the 18th and the 19th century. Present in 3 distinct functional districts, namely the administrative district, which is around the Lal Dighi area or the water tank, comprising the governmental and the institutional buildings, where different departments of government are the primary stakeholders, riverfront district, comprising mostly of the warehouses, where the Port Trust of India is the primary stakeholder, and the banking district, comprising mainly of banks and estate agents like the Mackinnon Mackenzie, where the commercial offices and chambers are the primary stakeholders. So that's the kind of roughly the area where you have the riverfront district and the administrative district and the banking district, all kind of get together in a symbiotic, functional relationship. Nowhere, I think what makes Dalhousie Square very significant is that you have the administrative building back to back with the commercial space. That makes it very unique. Today, India, the independent India, Bombay is the financial capital. Calcutta, Delhi is the administrative capital. Calcutta was both, and it was designed as a both. It was both the financial and the administrative capital. The Dalhousie Square site, therefore, one should envision a shared vision of Dalhousie Square. In order to create a better designed, a better conserved, a better managed, and a better enhanced image of the city centre, to which the future of the city is linked. The revised city centre that can sustain itself in the long term, therefore, cannot be cosmetic and deep skin deep, and can happen only with a comprehensive conservation-led development plan and strategy, which is participatory in nature, which is income generating in some form, and which is, if implemented in phased manner, with the inflow and availability of resources. The vision of Dalhousie Square, therefore, is to mobilize opinion and participation of the stakeholders in recognizing the need for a long-term plan, and also demonstrating simultaneously some quick and mid-term wins. Finally, with more conducive environment, it is possible, by virtue of its sheer revitalization potential of Dalhousie Square on the one hand, and the historical significance on the other, it can elevate Dalhousie to an international platform. It can be a fitting case for urban showcasing and brand building that can go a long way, not only attracting investments of Dalhousie Square, but for the city as a whole. Two immediate systemic actions perhaps are required to safeguard and protect this historic city centre while we embark on the path of planning and development plan and strategy. The first is to formally declare the significant heritage precinct or zone by the local authority and the government, outlining and delineating this zone, and that should come up with a lot of participation of the various stakeholders and so on. The design, development and management of this historic city centre just cannot left to chance, and cannot be the same as for the other areas of the city. A more careful approach is necessary and will be necessary in order to achieve a better designed, managed, conserved and an enhanced image of the city centre. And the second, we need therefore a special town centre strategy or a cell within or assisting the local authority that will prepare the development plan, that will prepare the strategy in consultation with all the stakeholders for conservation, for upgrading, for enhancement, for improvement, with design and control guidelines, etc., so that the development is responsive and the character of the heritage zone is retained. Efforts towards this direction were on about a year from now, before the pandemic. Indian Museum tried to bring together all the stakeholders, all the organizations, cultural bodies, and the government institutions to discuss this safeguard strategy. And it was very strongly felt in that workshop that the historic core of Dalhousie Square, where the 18th and the 19th century Calcutta still largely survives, is a deserving candidate to nominate for a World Heritage inscription that will help not only to safeguard the site, but it will help to mobilize efforts towards preservation and conservation of this significant heritage site of the nation. It was strongly felt that the process of inclusion of Kolkata, or the historic core of Dalhousie Square, should therefore begin with a concerted and collective effort to include in the national tentative list of World Heritage Site. That involves a lot of preparation, studies, cultural mapping, cultural research, contemporary research, projects which are adversely or positively impacting the site, impact assessments, and so on, which needs to be undertaken to put into the wish list or the tentative list of the World Heritage Site nomination within India, so that when it therefore gets a time to nominate to UNESCO in the subsequent years. Now this is that one needs to undertake to understand the significance and understands the dynamics of this place in all its details. And therefore this research, this action research, I would say, would and should be necessary to undertake to safeguard this very important heritage sites of the nation. Indian Museum already started this initiative of bringing together and providing a platform for this deliberation, and I would like to appeal to the Indian Museum that the architecture department of the sister NIVEDITA University will be very keen and very forthright to handhold this initiative in the coming years with the Indian Museum and all other stakeholders, so that a central research committee can be formed to research into, so that a preparation of a dossier can be attempted to work forward and work towards a World Heritage nomination for the Dalhousie Square Heritage Zone. Thank you.